let us do this. I appreciate your comments. What I'm going to do is ask each of the panel members if they have any questions for either side. I think because what we did now is just what I call opening statements, is just a summary argument. I think in case they have any questions for you, specifically related to the issues that got us here, I do need to swear you in, because what you say at that point will be under oath or affirmation. So if you'd raise your right hand, and you swear or affirm that the testimony that you might give today in question will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I swear.
Thank you. Dr. Berger, do you have any questions of either side?
Just one point. You made reference to your participation with WPHP, and I don't recall that. It's certainly not in the material given. I don't recall that. But can you describe that a little bit more?
Oh,
you
sure.
Participated
Sure.
with them for a month?
Sure. When the accusations were raised, and after 2 investigations that were done inside the hospital, investigations that, by the way, I'm still in the process of suing the hospital for the records of those investigations that were never provided to me. So I didn't even know what was the true nature of the accusations, or who made them, or who was called as a witness, or what was done in terms to delucidate, investigate, try to figure out what those accusations were, even though the conclusion was that they had no merit, any of them. I knew perfectly well that the referral to the WPHP had been done as a part of a retaliation process. When I went to visit with the WPHP, I previously investigated them, and I got acquainted with people that had gone through the WPHP. So when I approached them, I was extremely defensive, and I expressed myself as such, knowing perfectly well that being defensive in a mental health evaluation is very, can thwart, to some extent, the evaluation. In my first interaction with Dr. Jim Etienne, who was a psychiatrist that visited with me, he took his time, an hour and a half, to explain to me that I had to be aware that I was thrown into a process where justice, and this is, I quote his words, justice has no sense, and the only thing valid is the letter of the law. And that I had to take into account the shame that I was going to go through by being asked to participate in these evaluations, and the fact that I was away from my practice, and the fact that I was a Latin American. And Latin American physicians tend to be, stick their noses where they don't belong, instead of the physicians here in the US that only stick to what their job descriptions are. These were the type of opening statements that the psychiatrist that was supposed to evaluate me, when I knew I was there as a retaliation. These things, when I presented them to Etienne 2 days later as an email, asking him and telling him, this is what you said to me, he didn't even have the presence of mind to refuse them, to deny them, to give an alternative explanation. I requested from them on that initial visit that I had a recording of the evaluation if I was to be evaluated, because I didn't trust them. No, we don't do that. I requested that they contact certain board members in the hospital that had been intimately related with everything that I had done and that eventually took to the retaliation, and they refused to. And the explanation in writing from Dr. Etienne is that the board members are not important. They have nothing to do with this. These were people that I was bringing in to give the contextual information necessary to understand if my actions were connected to reality or were disconnected, which was a big question. All these exchanges eventually leading to them concluding that they were not able to evaluate me, and that for my evaluation I had to be referred either to Kansas City or to somewhere in Texas, I believe the other option was, and that I would have to pay out of pocket for a multidisciplinary evaluation that would take 5 or 6 days. When we reached that point, and the reason why it took a month and a half is because they would take 10 days or 13 days to answer me. It became so absurd. It became so grotesquely evident. Well, it had been evident to me from the very first visit, but I needed to document all that. So by the end of a month and a half of interactions, when I finished documenting how biased and how unprofessional they had behaved with me, then I said, see you guys, there's nothing I can do with you. In the meantime, I had gone through 4 different evaluations, 3 neuropsychological evaluations with a doctor in psychology, and a psychiatric evaluation with a psychiatrist. And all of them were completely normal.
So you spent an hour and a half with a psychiatrist from WPHP? That was the extent of their evaluation?
On that first visit. And I refused the evaluation initially until certain conditions were met.
So it turned out that was the only evaluation?
That was the only direct interaction. I had phone conversations and I had email exchanges for a month and a half after that.
Did you get a report from
No.
that evaluation?
No.
Did you get a report from that? I don't remember seeing that.
No, the WPHP never completed a report, nor did they perform an evaluation. They had conversations with Dr. Cornu-Labat.
I never gave them.
Just for clarity, perhaps at this point, none of that interaction was at the Commission's request. The Commission had no role in that. That all happened before and separate from the Commission's process.
That is correct. It's after I completed my interaction with WPHP that I self-reported this to the Commission.
Dr. Vandenveld discusses this process. The last 2 pages of Exhibit 3 are his assessment of the WPHP process.
Mr. Concan?
So you went to see WPHP this hour and a half while you were still working?
No, I had been put already on medical leave.
And for the QDMC, when they referred you to WPHP, did you understand that the reason for it was because of potential substance abuse, the alcohol, or because they were concerned?
No, the alcohol had never been an issue. It was really the first attempt to scare me and shut me down. And this is part of the file and, on the commission, even though it's not here today. Even the CEO, that was the hand behind all these, recognizes, because socially he interacted with me extensively, recognizes that I never drink alcohol, so it's not even an issue. So it was a completely bogus accusation. That was the very first one. And within a matter of 48 hours, then apparently the questions about me acting abnormal surfaced and being disruptive and appearing to be all the stuff that was said, which essentially was completely baseless. It was so baseless that in November, when the accusations were written at the request of the commission, the 5 testimonies that were eventually presented on behalf of the hospital are so full of contradictions and ambiguities and things that don't even make sense, even to the point where one of the people that accused me and presented testimony, who was the head of the nursing staff at the hospital, talks about things like me showing up in the emergency room with ruffled hair when I had been for a year and a half with a bald head in honor of my son. So even lies are evident in those testimonies that were presented, and that unfortunately were the testimonies in which the commission based their decision to request an exam for me.
So the hour and a half that you had with the psychiatrist led over the next several weeks, in terms of back and forth, to a suggestion or requirement that you go get evaluated in Kansas or Texas or somewhere.
Yeah.
That's incorrect. There is a letter in evidence in one of the prior proceedings from his employer which directs him to go to WPHP and get evaluated. He had a conversation with WPHP. The result of that is the evaluation would be in Texas or Kansas City. So it is not the case that that hour-and-a-half conversation raised concerns. That hour and a half was about what kind of evaluation would be performed.
And I guess I know that there are questions that you probably have and statements that he undoubtedly wants to make, but we are quite far afield from the actual record before the commission at this point. The only relevance that the WPHP process, at least in the commission's view, had is to know that the hospital had asked it of him and that it had not been completed. That was the reason why it was raised for you, just so that you would be aware that the hospital had made that request of him. It had never been completed, and that was before the commission at the point where we were asking that an order be issued requiring him to get the examinations, which have not been.
And you self-reported that you had been dismissed?
I self-reported 4 things. I mean, the key were number one, that questions. I mean, the first thing, honestly, that questions have been raised about my well-being. Number 2, that this came within the context of problems that I was denouncing within the institution. Number 3, that I had been sent to interact with WPHP, and that interaction had been disastrous. And that was it, that I was putting myself in the commission's hands as the ultimate authority in the subject.
You had counsel at the time. No, did you self-report
I had
based on
counsel.
the advice of counsel?
No, and I would have counseled him not to do that. I did not believe there was any reason for him to self-report to this board, and I am fully aware that this board was not going to do the investigation of QBMC that he hoped it was, and that's, I believe there probably is somewhere in DOH where he will get a fair hearing on the problems at QBMC, but I understood it was not this panel, and I would have advised him not to self-report.
And as far as you know, did the QBMC ever report his dismissal?
Ms. O'Neill is the right person to answer that, but I believe they only provided information after DOH contacted them regarding his self-report.
There's one aspect of the process that you need to be aware of to complete your question. WPHP, and I haven't been able to find a law that forced them to do that, but it is understood that they have to report anybody that has been referred to them and that does not comply to with what they ever determined, they have to report to the commission that person. So knowing that I was going to be refusing them and that I would end up here, I wanted to make sure that I was coming here voluntarily, openly, and with nothing to hide. And that's why I went ahead and self-reported.
I don't have anything further.
Dr. Gould?
Yes. How long had you been practicing at this?
I started in February of 2007. Actually, when I was brought in to start the surgery program because there was no surgery program.
So approximately 2 years, is that correct?
Correct.
And then are there other surgeons there now?
I believe about 3 months or so after I was dismissed, or 3 to 6 months after I was dismissed, another surgeon came in.
And in the hiatus that you were not there and they had not brought somebody else in, what happened to those patients?
The patients, they were, well, I questioned that significantly because, and some of them actually I followed them up. Some of my patients that didn't follow up, I followed them up on my own. I wasn't working, there was nobody taking care of surgery at the hospital. They really didn't know what to do. I mean, the situation in Quincy, I know you guys don't want to get into the details, but in that hospital is absolutely disastrous.
And you were an employed physician with
Yes.
them? And so they provided you your office and office staff, is that correct?
Correct.
And then prior to your work at Quincy, where were you working?
My previous job was in a rural hospital in Nebraska.
in the Nebraska Panhandle.
And how long were you there?
Almost a little over 4 years.
And what brought you to Quincy?
The CEO that ended up being behind all these had actually been for a year the CEO in Nebraska in this hospital. We had got very close, very acquainted. And he's the one that moved out of the hospital in Nebraska in beginning of 2006, and eventually worked his way as part of his proposal to bring up the Quincy Hospital. Was opening a surgery program, and he knew a great surgeon that would be perfect, and did everything possible to bring me in.
And are you currently licensed in any other state?
No. I had my license in Nebraska and in Ohio, sorry, that I left once I moved out. I never made any effort to keep them.
And then if your license gets reinstated today, what are your plans?
I desperately need to work. And I've been entertaining several options. I actually had last year 3 offers for work. None of them could come into fruition because of the open case with the commission. One was in Oregon, but when we got to the point where I needed the Oregon license, and the Oregon license could not be completed until this procedure was finished. And the same issue happened in Ohio, and with a particular company that was for locum tenens in VA hospitals. But that particular one, the difficulty was in the credentialing process. Their credentialing process, because there was an open case, they couldn't credential me.
So if an opportunity came up within the state of Washington, would you be interested in that? Or?
Well, certainly that's going to be the quickest way for me, yes.
And you have not practiced surgery in how long then?
It's been 2 years.
What have you done in the interval to keep up your education
Study.
skills?
Just study, read. Otherwise, I have had no, I have the informal exposure all practitioners have to healthcare with people in my interactions, but otherwise I haven't been able to do anything.
And short of dissecting frogs, I'm not sure what he could do without a license, right?
Excuse me. What was the initial task that you were asked to do?
I was asked by the CEO to provide a new vision. The initial project of the CEO was to build some basics in the hospital. And by the end of 2008, it had become evident that the facelift had been done, but there was no true significant vision for the hospital to grow. I have, since I started my practice, I've been in the practice of developing the practice of holistic medicine and surgery. And this was the essence of what was brought forward as a proposal, and that was embraced immediately by the administration and by the board. Now, bringing forward a concept of holistic medicine and integral medicine, bringing complementary healing techniques to the standards, it's something that is extremely serious and requires a level of commitment and seriousness in work that is very high. The very first part of the project that was initiated and that I was invited to participate in required, with the help of an outside consultant, an in-depth assessment of the resources of the hospital. Was this assessment what brought forward a lot of problems within the institution? Main ones was a tremendous, profound culture of bullying as the way for the administration, and unfortunately this person that was my friend was right in the middle. And his choice in the end was to shoot the messenger.
which is what I had to go through for the last 2 years, the process of shooting the messenger.
Did you say profound culture of bullying?
Bullying.
Bullying.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, these types of reinstatement hearings always involve a history, and we have gone over that history in here. But just to summarize, it's the department's position that he is in compliance.
Yes.
If there's no more questions, we would normally close this hearing for deliberations. And yes, sir.
Can I follow on to a question, please, from Dr. Moore? I'm glad you brought up the issue of 2 years since you've actually practiced. I take it you have not seen patients at all in 2 years, is that?
Not officially, no. Correct.
Well,
But not officially. What I refer to is that in our normal interactions, we lost our house over a year ago, and well, almost a year ago, and I've been living with friends that have opened their house. I mean, I have to think as a physician many times in my daily life, but no, I have not been
and you've not
practicing.
done surgery in 2 years.
I have not done surgery.
So should your license be reinstated and you find employment either here or Oregon or wherever, do you have a plan of how you're going to?
That will depend a lot on my employer or the place where I go, because one thing is how I feel about my skills as a surgeon, and another thing is how I'm perceived. What counts here is how I'm perceived in terms of me securing employment. So I will likely have to go through some kind of proctoring or some period of further training. So I have to, it depends a lot on how things play out. And I'm certainly desperate to get back to what I know.
normally what would happen at this point is we would close the hearing for deliberations, and the panel would deliberate in private. The question always comes, or often comes up, does the panel make a decision on the very day that they have the hearing? The answer is sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. And I can never predict that. The parties are welcome to wait for a reasonable amount of time, but I can't guarantee a decision is made today.
I have prepared a proposed order that the commission could use if they choose to.
Thank you so much. We will consider that. And so I invite the parties, if they want to wait for a reasonable amount of time out in the waiting room upstairs, to do that. But I can't guarantee that the decision would actually be made.
And Mr. Lawyer, I just want to reemphasize that it is our position that in terms of the suspension, there is no legal basis to continue beyond today. Whether a separate statement of charges is issued is a different matter, but it's our position that he needs to walk out here today able to search for employment.
The only addition I would make to that, it is our recommendation that he be reinstated on the basis that the suspension order suspended him until he completed the examinations and until he appeared before the commission, and he's done both of those things. I would only say that the presiding officer is quite correct. You are not under an obligation to issue that order today, but I think your previous order indicates that the action should be taken as expeditiously as the commission can.
We'll try to do that. So I'm going to close the hearing at this point, and when the clock goes off, that means it's stop recording. And I would ask, except for the panel, the panel remains here, but everyone else would have to. Thank you all.